Hi, welcome back to the podcast School of Love, where we advocate parent-child relationships where you can talk about anything, especially sex. And today we're talking about uncomfortable conversations. And Andrew, Love, and I unpack this topic and we get to why we should even have those conversations instead of run away from them. Because running away from them, in reality, you're not actually getting rid of that discomfort, but just getting used to it. But when you go towards those conversations and you really just take on that elephant in the room, although poor elephants, I mean, why elephant? It's like, yeah, it could be something a bit more nasty like a crocodile, although I don't want to be mean to crocodiles. But yeah, if you take on that awkward conversation, that can really lead you toward a deeper relationship and a depth that you don't want to miss in your relationship with your child. And so I hope this episode helps you to take on the uncomfortable conversation that you might be avoiding. Whether you're a parent or anyone, I feel like this is a really great episode in seeing the value behind heading towards those uncomfortable conversations and learning from them and growing from them. And yeah, we also talk about how it's never going to be that we're not uncomfortable. There's always the next level, but that's how we're growing. And so yeah, sit back and enjoy this episode. Hello, welcome back to the podcast School of Love, and welcome back, Andrew Love, to this podcast.
Gracias.
Yeah, today we want to talk about uncomfortable conversations and how to get through them, not an escape route. So unfortunately, if that's what you're hoping for, then please tune in next time because today we want to talk about how to get through those conversations. Yeah, and particularly uncomfortable conversations that maybe some of you, talking about sex might be uncomfortable to some people. So we specifically want to talk about that too. Have you had any uncomfortable conversations recently, Andrew?
This morning.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I had a fight with two people that I work with and staff meeting. It wasn't a fight. That seems petty, but we just had a disagreement and it got very uncomfortable. And a part of me, I would call it the baby side of me, wanted to just hang up and say, "You're stupid and I hate you and I'm right and you're wrong." And I just wanted to quit and I wanted to go away, run away, and just do something else, right? That's the discomfort. It's weird. It's an emotional thing, clearly, but the desire to physically want to run away and hide is very real. Just sleep. Some people sleep or get a snack, get a high fat snack or watch some stupid thing on YouTube. But we just continued and continued and continued. And I resolved it with one of the two people I was fighting with. The other person and I need another uncomfortable conversation because I can tell this person has feelings about me and I feel like he's wrong, and we have to just go in with that in mind that he's gonna say stuff about me that I don't want to hear because it's gonna hurt my ego, and I'm gonna think he's automatically wrong, and I need to adjust. I need to hear him. Anyway, it happened literally actually today. But it happens all the time. When you welcome this kind of life, it's like that nervous feeling in your stomach doesn't necessarily go away. It's just you get used to it. It's a good feeling. You realize it's a sign of progress rather than a sign of danger. A lot of people run the opposite direction. They're like, "Oh, I'm nervous. I don't want to do this." But that's where all the riches are, is when you have a conversation that challenges your concepts. There's no way beyond any reasonable, expectation that you are 100% right about everything all the time. And yet somehow hearing that you're wrong about anything hurts. So the math doesn't add up. You have to be wrong about some stuff sometimes. So why can't you just hear it? So yeah. It's fresh. I'm still feeling the nerves. Like it took, just for context, I left the call and I got off. It was our time. We checked out and we moved on. And the first thing I did was I went outside and I just hugged my wife. I didn't tell her anything because I didn't want to give her that. I just wanted to breathe in a different energy, and I didn't want to give her my energy. And she just kind of stabilized me a bit. Throughout the day, I've been processing it. I did talk about it later with her, but not in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have the people that support us through that uncomfort. Yeah, I was also thinking about what's uncomfortable for me, what kind of conversations. Yeah, sometimes like a sort of tensity will grow between my husband and I sometimes, but I've learned to look that in the eye and just be like, it's happening again. That means we need
Mm.
to talk, you know?
Hmm.
And I realized that's so much, I mean, it's still uncomfortable, but it's so much better for us. Yeah, it just made me think this uncomfort, it's like a little kind of pet that hides in your house, like a little dark thing. And you're kind of like, ooh, what's that? And you think maybe it's gross and you don't want to look at it. Kind of like if you're scared of spiders, you don't want to go and find one big fat spider in your house. But
Mm.
then it helps so much to just turn the lights on and really look at whatever that thing is, and you probably will realize, oh, it's not so bad, or maybe it is just a hilarious little looking beast,
Mm.
or whatever it is. It's just so much better with the lights on, and you look straight at it and just discover that creature of uncomfort.
It's amazing how much of our lives can be dictated by the avoidance of discomfort, right?
Mm.
So if you have a neighbor that you don't like, you'll look out the window before you go to your car so you don't have to bump into them, right? So your schedule's now. I had neighbors where one lady just had she's really, I don't know, wild. And you didn't know which version of her you're going to get. And another neighbor had a big dog, and that dog approached her and she got really scared and she started screaming and screaming expletives and expletives. And she's, I hate you. I hate your dogs and all this stuff.
Okay.
And when that happens once, like it actually happened twice, but like you start to build up these, I just want to walk to my car. And now she's got these feelings about walking to her car. I don't want to run into this dog. And, it builds this tension. And so now it just, simple things can become complicated, right? I don't want to go home because I know my spouse is going to want to have this meeting. Or like in my family, it was the fact that nobody would talk about uncomfortable things made it 1,000 times more uncomfortable. Because if I ever did bad in school, which was often, aka all the time, like every time there's a report card or a parent teacher meeting in the beginning of my high school career, I got better. I pulled it around, but in the beginning of high school, I was just really looking for attention. And every time my parents would have a parent teacher meeting, the teachers would tell my parents stuff that just horrified them. Like, he did what? And I just knew that was coming. And then my parents would just come home crying and we wouldn't talk about it. And then I was just sitting with this feeling, knowing that my parents were holding this heaviness and I had done something, but we didn't talk our way through it. So it just lingers. And then it gets stored, right? So this idea of like, there is no avoidance. There's no avoidance. The idea of avoiding a difficult conversation is just you're letting yourself stew in the discomfort. You're prolonging this discomfort. You're not avoiding the uncomfortable conversation. You're just getting used to the discomfort. It's like avoiding having a shower is just getting used to being a smelly person, right? You're getting used to the filth, right? Especially if you're a young boy who rolls around in the mud and stuff like this. It's like honestly, you just get used to it, but it doesn't make things go away. And in fact, it just makes everything get worse over time. And so you're doing yourself a great disservice. And, I was just in the Philippines over the weekend. We were relaunching the chapter there. And I got into a really deep conversation with somebody. I can really see the analogy of like everything that you want is on the other side of this really dark tunnel. And you got to go into the dark tunnel and you don't know what's going to be in there, but it's going to be a lot of your fears. But then you'll find that the only way to find any semblance of peace in your life or those joyful feelings of being comfortable in your own skin where life is just good, it just feels good to be alive, those moments are always only on the other side of that tunnel. You have to go through it, but it's the one thing that nobody wants to do because it's scary. And especially the longer that you wait, there's more and more stuff accumulating in this tunnel. But if you go there with other people or you find a way to do it, you just like, not to be a nerd, but the whole Batman analogy in that trilogy was that Batman embraced the darkness. And he did it in a literal sense where he was afraid of bats. So he just goes to a bat cave and just like faces his fears. But it's those bats could easily be an analogy for the shame that you feel for something you did in your marriage, or the fact that you haven't talked to your kids about sex yet and you're really worried about what they might know or think or might have even done. But prolonging it just makes that fear have a bigger grip on you. And the more that you just allow yourself to, like you said, steep yourself in that discomfort, it stops being uncomfortable. And that's the thing that we promote at High Noon, is like, you just have as many uncomfortable conversations as is needed until they stop being uncomfortable. It's only uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. Mm-hmm. It's like the first day on a job is always going to be awkward. You know, walking around, you don't know where anything is. The conversations seem a little clunky, but within a couple weeks, you're pretty, used to your environment. Within a month or so, you're talking to people, you have friends, whatever. So it's the same with difficult conversations. Is when you just allow yourself to be there and to have them and to talk about it and process it, it stops being uncomfortable. But like I said early on, like the nervous feelings don't go away because there's always more and more levels to go to. There's always more layers to peel back. The more that you get to know yourself, and if you're in a relationship with somebody, the more that you get to know them, there's always like stuff that you're learning about yourself. And so there's always ample room for difficult conversations to present themselves. But then you just have as many conversations as you have, it gets easy, and then you move on to the next level. Mm-hmm. Deeper and deeper and deeper. And then your love becomes richer and richer because you can trust each other with telling each other, in the case of a marriage, let's say, there's nothing that can replace the trust of telling somebody what you really think and what you really feel. That's liberation. That's the High Noon way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was also thinking recently, because sometimes I'm just wishing, like, why can't I be in tune with God 100% all the time? But it just doesn't always work out. But then I was thinking, there are sometimes these uncomfortable things that I notice in my life. And I was thinking maybe these are actually the arrows pointing me how to get to God, And that's actually how I can try to welcome that discomfort as much as I can. And then on the other side, there's that light at the tunnel. There's that being in tune with God that I'm hoping for. But of course, like you said, it's the next thing is going to come. And then hopefully I can learn to become more and more in tune through these discomforts or challenges or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. And just to put it in real, like a context that's a little bit more tangible. In terms of talking with your kids, I've been thinking so much about this over the years because there's this disease that we've inherited where somehow talking to your own children about sex brings fear into people. And that makes no sense because they are born of your sex, like just directly. There's a direct tie between the fact that you had sex and the fact that your kids exist, right? So the idea that we have this one topic that seems to be so taboo that it brings fear into the hearts of even the most daring of men. It's just the one no-go zone that seems to be common wherever you go in this world just proves to me the validity of principle, right? That absolutely, like, sexuality has something to do with humanity's divergence from the divine, right? That our going into the gutters where we've been for eons has definitely ties with sex, for sure. Because there's no logical reason why it would be the case that you would be afraid to talk to your kids about sex, right? You and I were talking a little bit yesterday about this idea that, my parents never talked to me at all about sex. I think I mentioned this when I was on earlier, but like a book about puberty showed up in my room one day in my bookshelf, and it was even more awkward because that means that they were in my room, in my bookshelf, planting books. Like that's just weird, right? And so later, that culture showed me that this is such a devastatingly scary topic that it shall not be addressed. It's just intuitively so clearly like awkward that let's just not go there. But then I learned how to talk about it with my friends in high school, right? And then it was easy to talk about it. So it's not that it's inherently hard, it's just the culture. And so if you create a culture where it's fine to talk about it, then it just naturally flows much more easily, right? And that's what I wanted to create in my family. And that's what we've been creating since the very beginning, of never feeling like I'm an expert, even though this is like what I do. And you could say that I'm an expert. That's never how I address my kids, like the all-knowing expert. But I'm always curious about what they think about stuff, what they're seeing, how they interpret the world. If we're out somewhere and like, sometimes you just can't protect them from certain imagery, right? Go to Times Square and try to get somebody to not see somebody scantily clad, or you walk by a triple X show or whatever. There's all sorts of ways in which they see the world, and they're seeing it regardless, and they're processing it like a little kid, which is gobbledygook. It doesn't make sense. There's no way that they could understand that. And so not talking to them is robbing them of this golden opportunity to connect, helping them make the world make sense, right? By talking about it, helping to see through their eyes and to hear from their opinions, and then to process, well, what do you think? And how do you see it? And like comparing notes and helping to guide them, but in a loving and warm way, is not only helpful for them, but it is actually, like you said, where the riches are. That nervous feeling is exactly where God is kind of trying to point you. It's like, that's where the gold is, right? All success is on the other side of some sort of failure, trial and error or whatever. Same with relationships, is you get such a warm feeling of trust is built only on the other side of sharing difficulties together. And sometimes that's, having a difficult conversation. So I can't express like how important it is to experience the good stuff. That's obviously to avoid the bad stuff, because how else are they going to get educated about sex? But the good stuff too, to help feel so close to your kids. There's no better feeling that I could imagine than feeling that intimacy with your kids, that you get each other and that they feel like, oh, my parents have got my back. They can hear me. It's such a wonderful feeling when they trust you enough to ask you questions, when they're curious and they ask you. That's such an honor, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think, like we were just saying, how like if you prolong it, it gets more uncomfortable, and you can really put that into this context of talking with your kids about sex, because like if it's already, the idea comes, you can already start in some way, and if you're like shoving it away for later, it probably will become more uncomfortable, and not only just for you, then also for them, because of all the gobbledygook, like you mentioned, all the input that they get from other sources, that is so confusing. And so like, yeah, that's why I feel like this topic comes up really often, like when to start. And yeah, start right away. I don't know, in some sort of small form. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I remember I was at a workshop. I was giving a workshop. It was at Uncle Dave's house. It was a long time ago. My son, who's now 11, was 4 or 5, something like that. And he was attending the workshop. I don't know how much he was getting, but when I was just talking about like what to do if you see anything online. And so I was like, I've actually had this conversation with my son, and I was like, hey, buddy, I said his name. And I was like, what happens if you see naked people on a screen? What do you do? And he said, I go right to you and talk to you and ask you about it, And then I said, yeah, buddy, good job. And that's been the script, is like, whatever happens, just ask me and we'll figure it out together. It's never come to me and I'll scold you, right? And he has to trust that, right? So I have to have a foundation that when he does come to me, I do say, okay, let's talk about it. But it's also, for us, it takes the weight off of our shoulders to have to know what to do at all times. Because you start reading books about psychology and it gives you should do this and you should do this. And there's so many methodologies and ideas, and it makes you feel like you're studying for a test and you have to do all the right things. And it's quite stressful. It's very unnatural, actually. The best thing that you could do is just create the culture where regardless, they feel like they can tell you, and that you'll go on a discovery journey together, side by side, as a team. And if they feel like you're on their team, they're much more likely to bring this stuff up to you when it comes up, when they have questions. And so yeah, that's what we've been doing for this whole time, and it seemed to work well. I can't say that they ask me about everything because I don't know. Maybe they have things lingering around, but I'm continually opening doors. I think it was last week. I had an opportunity with one of my sons. We just had some alone time for a little bit, and he was feeling kind of like, I could tell he wanted to hug me, and he was just being a little bit, he wanted my attention. I was just saying like how much I really appreciate you. Like, I think you're a great guy, and just giving him some love. And I said, please don't ever feel like you have to be anything other than yourself, and just let me know if you ever have any questions. I love to talk to you. Like, I just love it so much. And I just reassured him that was my intention, right? And of course, I can't force him to do this, but I can continually open the door and create an inviting environment to come back to me. And I think at the end of the day, that's precisely what the principle talks about. Is Heavenly Parents' job in all of this is never to do the work for us, but continually open doors for us to go back to God. Everywhere. God is everywhere all the time. It's just like, do we choose to go back to him? That's the standard that we're supposed to follow. As far as I can tell, is just continually make connection and offer the warm embrace of our undying devotion to their lives, That sounded really lofty. I guess the simpler version of that is just like, I love you. I'm interested in you. I don't have all the answers, but I'm definitely on your side, and we can figure it out if we just work together. And it's happened. Nothing major, but for sure, we work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for the parents, that's like, if you don't have all the answers, well, then you could read blogs together. That's why we have the High Noon blog. That's School of Love has a bunch of resources. You can read books together. There's all sorts of resources, and you do it together as somebody who's also learning, because that also makes them feel like, oh, we're both learning this together. Because if they come to you and you just lecture them, they'll most likely stop coming to you.
Yeah. And that's like, we also talked about this a little bit, but that's really changing history, right? Because you said, like, if you compare that culture that you have built in your family to the sneaking a book on the shelf culture that you had to go through, that's totally different. And then if you think about, like, how will your son be when he grows up and has his family? Of course, yeah, there are a lot of question marks, but he has such a great foundation to start from. And that's also what we want to do as parents, is give that to our kids. And so, yeah, like all of this uncomfort, it's there for a reason. It's so we can get through it and help our kids so they can work on other issues, right? There's so much other things to work on to make this world a better place. But once they get through this uncomfort around sexuality, and just see it as a wonderful gift from God, then they can move on and they can find other things to work on.
Yeah. Again, it's just so enjoyable too, because it's in those conversations that you get to know the nuance of the person, right? It's really hard to actually get to know how somebody thinks in a deep and nuanced way. And when you find these little quirks, it makes them so much more of an individual rather than an approximation. And you can't know who that person is unless you do that work of getting to know the extremes and everything in between. So the extremes are like their biggest fears, and their deepest anxieties, and then also their greatest hopes and their dreams, and then kind of everything in between. But we often don't make space for those conversations to happen. We put them off. We just talk about maintenance-based stuff, and we put off these meetings, and we make them. I know a family, and I'm not going to suggest who they are, but every time the parents had something to tell the kids, they'd make a big deal of it, and they'd be like, we really need to talk to you. Let's go out for dinner. We want to talk to you. And the kids would be so scared. It'd be so stressful. And then sometimes it wasn't even that big of a deal, and they really resented their parents for like just giving them so much stress. And like, can we just talk? Can you just bring it up? Can we just talk about it instead of making a big deal out of it, making it an event? And yeah, so, I'm sure there's some people who are listening who are wishing that I could just give them tactics. There's so many books on tactics. That's not the point, is tactics. You get to know that kid, and in terms of kids, in terms of talking about your kids about uncomfortable conversations, and find out how they open up. It's different kids open up very differently. Some people much more directly. You can ask them direct questions. Some of them some kids close up if you ask them too directly without some sort of a foundation because they're just really sensitive or they're really guarded. It's not a bad thing, but it's learning how they connect and how they open up. And again, that's the nuance. That's a loving thing to do, is learning how your kids open up their hearts, right? And you want to do that before you have a deep conversation, is you want to make sure that they feel safe with you. And they cannot feel safe with you unless you understand what factors allow them to feel safe. And I really feel like every kid is different, but it's worth knowing, because again, you can use that to have difficult conversations with, but you can also use that very same skill to just let them know that they're loved. Like the whole 5 love languages thing, that's invaluable to get to know what are your kids' love languages. And if it's doing stuff together, then you go and do stuff, and then you have a conversation too. And then little by little, you unravel this kind of communication. And that's the other thing too, is like, imagine that all of your uncomfortable conversations, think about a topic that's super uncomfortable for you to have with your kids. Now imagine the exact opposite, that it is the most enjoyable conversation you could possibly have. Like that's what's at stake here, is you're missing out on all of these joyful conversations and learning about your kid in such beautiful ways by not prioritizing those conversations,
Yeah. Yeah, I think, because I was also thinking, like, why was this conversation? I mean, bringing this up, the topic of sex with my kids, was, I mean, in the beginning, it's just kind of, they ask questions and I would just kind of exchange looks with my husband, like, should we talk about this? And we would answer their questions. But now I'm like really taking this into my own hands and like bringing it up myself. And
Yeah.
so I was thinking, how did I switch? And so for me, it was really, before I was just unsure because I never learned this in my own family. So it's just a lack of knowledge.
Sure.
And how to talk, what to say, when. And then recently, it's just recognizing the importance of this conversation and how much value it can give to my kids. It's essential. It's an essential part of life.
Yes.
Like you said, it's how they even exist. And so, yeah, just recognizing that's made me just want to head on any kind of uncomfort and just try it out. And yeah, to just make it supernatural, naturalize everything there is to do about sex. Because I think my parents, they kind of went more the route of like, let's make this a special moment. Let's do it like, I don't know, plan this time of day. But like, honestly, that's so much more work.
Yeah.
And it can make kids feel already, the buildup can be uncomfortable. And so, yeah, that's just been our way so far to move from uncomfortable to, I mean, I'm not going to say everything is totally comfortable still. I mean, I'm still learning.
Sure.
But
again, there is no totally
normalize.
comfortable forever, because they're going to grow up and their situations are going to become more complex, and our world is quite complex, right? So it's never set it and forget it. That's such a fallacy. It's like the idea of one and done is bananas. But even the idea that like your job is done ever at any point means that, in some ways you're clocking out on a huge part of their life. You're just not involved in it. But why? Why would you? Why wouldn't you want to be a part of every aspect of their life that they invite you into, right? And it's an honor that they would. But it's kind of like you have to renew the lease of trust. I also noticed that there's definitely a too much. Like people who, like me, like this is my work. This is my kind of obsession. This is what I help people with. But I also know life coaches. I also know therapists, and they bring that terminology home, and their kids are overly conversant in like therapy jargon, and it's too much. It shouldn't be this formal thing. The idea is just that you're creating a natural environment where you talk about sex like you talk about anything else, with respect, with care, with, a range of emotions, that it should just be like anything else that's important. Right. And yeah, it requires you to listen sometimes and to share your opinion sometimes, and it's dynamic, right? So it's, first of all, it's never done, nor should it. It's like, well, okay, at what point in your marriage do you just stop having nice conversations? Well, hopefully never. Hopefully you're always, you have new things to share with each other. Hopefully you can always find new ways to laugh and to cry and whatnot. And the same thing with your kids. It's, the topic of sex is, I would hope that, into my kids' marriage, I can still be relevant. And we have an episode of the Weatheralls on our podcast. They were also on the 24-hour summit talking about how their son just got blessed, and they were having great conversations about them as they were starting their relationship. And they wanted to, it's completely like different realm now. It's like now they can compare, I don't know, compare notes, but they can talk about it as two people who are participating in this world, in this new world. And like, really the sky's the limit, especially now that we have high noon couples that are in their 70s approaching their 80s who are very open about their continued devotion to having heavenly sexuality, and they're doing that within their families. Like, that's uncharted territory, right? That you can have grandparents talking so openly. But actually, Daniela Weatherall talks about how her aunt from Italy, she's super Italian, was very open about this, about, how much she loved making love to her husband and stuff like that. And she said this at one of her big anniversary birthday parties, and everybody was like, oh my God, she's an old lady. But that's what's at stake, is like, imagine having, it's not an obsession. You don't want to be talking about it all the time. That's just weird, but it's a topic that is just as, it induces just nice warm feelings, just like anything else. It's just another great topic to discuss naturally as a family when it comes up, when it makes sense, right? That is not the focal point, and that is also not hidden. That is just there with everything else you cherish. It's on the mantle with all your other trophies. It's like, it's just another thing that you love and cherish, and when it makes sense, talk about it. That's the goal, right? High noon is, I think some people think we're sex obsessed, and it's not. That's how they associate us, because that's all we're ever talking about. But that's not what I do at home. That's crazy. But we do, but only when it makes sense, I don't know the frequency, sometimes more than others. It depends what's going on with them and with our lives. But yeah, I think that's the goal, right? Is you would want to make the space for anything that bubbles up to say, oh, there's that thing that just bubbled up, rather than seeing it bubbling up and being so stressed out. And when it bubbles up, you don't know to freak out or to run away, and it just bubbles up. You're like, oh, that thing bubbled up. Let's talk about it. It's just natural that, you're going with a flow.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to just say it's also okay to practice talking about it if you already notice, like, oh, I think that's a really like weird topic for me to talk about, especially with my kids. And it's okay to practice, like, especially with a spouse. Or I recently heard one brother gave a testimony and said he started talking to his baby daughter about it, and that she doesn't understand anything, right, in the beginning, but it was just for him to practice saying the words, getting used to the terminology, and and thinking, oh, okay, maybe that didn't sound so good. In the future, I'm gonna say it maybe in another way, And it was great practice. And it also reminds me of, I was looking through some of the high noon, like you guys have loads of videos all stocked up, and I was looking through that library, and I found a testimony of a first gen mom. I forget her name, but she said she just realized talking about pornography is so important, but still so uncomfortable for herself. So she made a goal of talking about it every day to someone. And so she talked about it like with her friends, and then, I don't know, neighbors or other people. I mean, mostly older people, because she was, I think, already in her 60s. But it just made it a normal thing. And it's just like what we said earlier, it's mainly uncomfortable because it's new and we're not used to it.
Yeah.
And it's just inviting that newness into your family because it's important. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool to lift the barriers, because the more that I study this, and this has been all I've done for the past decade, basically, learn about, first it was about pornography and its impacts, but then really studying True Parents' words about what is the vision for this whole sex thing, right? And then learning how to bridge the gap between where we're at and where we're meant to be, right? And it's something that the more I study, the more I'm humbled by how much we don't actually understand. So that's also alleviated this feeling like I have to know stuff. Because even when my kids ask me questions, or I try to explain my impression, if we see something in a movie, right, and it's like counter to what I've been teaching them, you know, their hypersexualized culture, and they're curious and we have a conversation about it, I always let them know that this is what I understand to be truth, insofar as I can understand it. And they're not forced ever to believe what I believe, but I've thought a lot about this, and this is what I can impart to you. And if you have different opinions, it's really good that we talk about it. Because that's another thing, is that parents think just because they say something that their kids naturally believe it. And that's dangerous too, is that they just have an unquestioning belief in every word that you say. Good luck with that. I don't think that's ever happened. And it's not healthy. Honestly, like, they should question things sometimes, and it's healthy in a respectful way, obviously, but that they even question, well, are you sure that's true? And like, okay, well, let's unpack that. And it forces you into a position. That's what I love. My wife, her English she learned it on the streets of fundraising. That's how she learned English. So a lot of times I'll say something and then she'll say, what does that mean? And it's just a basic word that I use all the time. I'm like, yeah, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. I don't, and you realize that you have a lot of rounding up, or like you kind of, you're not crystal clear on some of the things that you say. And the same with when your kids question you, I think it's your ego that feels offended, of like, how dare you question me? I'm your parents, right? But a more humble approach is to think about it and be a little bit more thoughtful. And there's a saying that I think Albert Einstein said. It was like, if you can't explain a concept to a 4-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. And so it's a great exercise in figuring out what you actually believe. Because I think there's the immediate things that you would say that you believe. But if you dig deeper, that your actual beliefs are not necessarily contradictory, but they're a little bit more nuanced and, worth unpacking. And so having these conversations in the sense that you're also learning, but you're ahead because you've been thinking a lot about this, and you're in a marriage. So, you have a foundation. So you do have wisdom, but at the same time that you're learning too is it makes you more approachable, but it also allows you the opportunity to actually learn yourself. Because this is a very rich topic, like sex, and it's unbelievably rich. And there's always layers that are undiscovered for humanity at large and for us as individuals. And it's not possible if you think you know it all. And again, that know-it-all attitude has a lot of limitations. And at some point, your kids will get sick of hearing you just asserting your concrete, unmoving opinions. And I see a lot of friction. I see a lot of kids, honestly, going in a divergent path from their parents because there's no wiggle room. Whereas if they could just be a little bit more flexible and have a little bit more room for nuanced conversation, they could find that they're on a similar path. But some kids just fully feel the need to reject what their parents believe. I've just seen it time and again. I mean, I'm sure you have too, growing up in this movement. Kids are like, I don't believe in anything that you say, because they clump it all together because there's no room to discuss their doubts or their fears or their disagreements. And disagreements aren't necessarily bad. It could be a variety of things. It could be fear-based. It could be ignorance-based. It could be maybe they're actually partially right and you haven't fully thought about this. But it's in those conversations also that you sharpen your sword, that you learn what you believe in a more beautiful and intimate way, that you can appreciate. You can have your own insights. Having these conversations with you and like all the conversations that I have, it's like, it's more educational for me than anything, because it's like, wow, yeah, I get to discover more and more what I believe, and it's great. So if with our kids, again, it's about going on a journey together. And what makes you a leader is to be willing to go there first and to say, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how this is going to go, but let's try to make this fun and let's just try to do it. And you don't have to be good the first time. You're not going to be good the first time. It's like dancing. It's really awkward the first bunch of times, but then you start to get into a good groove. You're like, oh, I got that. And it becomes more fun. And then soon enough, it actually becomes a joy. I swear to you, it becomes a joy.
Yeah, I really love that, like what you just said, of just kind of inviting the opportunity for confrontation between a kid and a parent.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I think I really miss that in my own family that I grew up in. Um, and now, like, trying to deepen my faith and, question, like, how do I really listen to God? It's hard to talk about even those things, even though I have the same faith technically as my parents, but how do I even talk about anything different to what they believe, But
Mm-hmm.
everyone does have their own relationship with God. And so that's why, yeah, just recognizing that with our kids also, that they have their own relationship, their own questions, their own impressions, and inviting that into your own life and talking about it. Yeah, like you said, we can learn so much ourselves, and yeah, it's just I think a great thing to have that kind of open communication.
Yeah. The main thing I think is this, right? They're gonna learn about all sorts of stuff from all sorts of places, from social media, especially about sex, right? They're gonna learn from social media, from their friends, all sorts of places. None of these places have the same level of love that you have for your kids. So they're learning about this deeply important act, sex, without the heart. And that is, to me, it's not a shame, it's a crime. It's why people are able to have heartless sex, because they don't know that they're meant to be entwined, deeply entwined. Like the deep sense of belonging to somebody and the act of sex. That's one and the same. That's the design. You can clearly see that when you're having that level of intimacy, that it creates good emotions. You become more productive in society, feel more connected. You have things like serotonin that are just pulsating and giving you so much feeling of connection with the other person. But you have heartless body sex, and it creates a sense of division, separation, isolation. And that's what we're left with in this world. And that's what our kids are learning from the internet. They're learning about all the mechanics without the heart. And
Mm-hmm.
that's our responsibility, is to teach them about the heart. That's like pretty much our only responsibility more than anything. It's act paramount for sure, is we're supposed to teach them the heart of God, not in word, but in essence, right? And in terms of sex, but also in terms of everything. That's, we're here to represent God to the best of our ability as parents, as their creators, right? And so that's this key point that, yeah, you might be scared. You'll figure it out. It'll be okay. But is it worth risking, even for a second, the fact that you are the one tasked with showing them the heart of God in all aspects, including sex, right? And they cannot learn that to the extent anywhere else from anybody else other than you, because you created them out of love through sex. So that helps bridge the gap between their creation and where they're at right now, and so that they can continue in that tradition. But again, yeah, they have to understand in words, but they have to feel it in essence. And that's the culture that we're asking people to try to cultivate. So High Noon is like more in the individual realm. School of Love is parent and child. And then now we have High Noon couples coming out soon, everybody, with Daria and Sebastian Mahler, which is going to help husbands and wives form this thing so that God can be at the center of all of these realms. That's the three great blessings in terms of sexuality. And that's going to be really good when that culture really starts to permeate.
Exciting stuff. Yeah, I was also just thinking about true parents. Like, I mean, obviously, true father didn't seem too uncomfortable to talk about sex. Um, yeah, but I was just thinking, like, what other uncomfortable conversations did they have to have? And yeah, I went back to the mother of peace, and she talks about this one time where she and true father, they took some time to prepare for a very uncomfortable conversation, or even I don't know if it was a weekend or a week or something, but they recognized the importance of this time and this conversation, and it had so much meaning. So they went to talk to Kim in Song, right? And that was actually very uncomfortable. They had so much pain caused by this man, and yeah, I don't know, all of his military. But yeah, they wanted to have that confrontation. And it wasn't easy. They took time. I just read in the Mother of Peace, they circled all around Hawaii a few times, just going through their own issues and pain and suffering. And True Mother said, like, she just wanted to approach him like a mother, because a mother can forgive anything, like from her own children, right? They want everything for their own children, and so yeah, they went through that work and they did it, and they came to him with open arms, and yeah, that was a real big victory.
Mm.
And Kim Il Sung, he succumbed to that.
He was brainwashed.
He melted in their true love. I don't know, of course, talking to our kids about sexuality isn't like meeting your arch enemy or anything, but just to say, some of us might have some issues around sexuality, maybe even trauma. We might have just, yeah, a weird culture around it because of how we grew up. But yeah, it's okay to take that time and, yeah, to just build up the courage to talk about sex, to talk about it with your spouse and also with your
Yeah,
kids.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what from the beginning, that was kind of our prescription for any kid who felt like they couldn't talk to their parents, was we asked, do a condition with them. Just say, I have something that I'd really like to share for you, but I'd really love for God to be there. So can we just do a condition together, pray together to create a foundation for, again, for that sense of intimacy, that feeling like there's no barriers between you and somebody else. It's a sense of openness, right? You really want that to exist, and it's hard when you're very naturally uncomfortable regarding a topic, right? And so that's great advice. Yeah, I remember that actually from another teaching, learning about True Father's like preparation before he went to North Korea. The other reason was because he didn't want to have any resentment in his heart, because I don't know if you've walked around with resentment, but you seem to attract some weird people. When you have a chip on your shoulder, that's when you can get into fights on the street and all sorts, right? So he wanted to go with a clean heart to like just bring that love and none of that other stuff. So yeah, as a parent, you have your own baggage. It's good that you try as much as possible to just clean up your heart. Again, there's no perfect. I find that parents are waiting for the perfect opportunity. There's no perfect opportunity. Just like there's no perfect time to be a parent. It's like whenever, there's your time and there's God's time. So some preparation, but most of the healing happens in the doing. You can do some level of condition as parents to just kind of open up your heart so that you can really cherish the moment, if anything, to be present, just even like meditating or praying on gratitude that you have a kid to have this conversation with, that they're teaching you about how to love them. What a gift. Like God gave you a child so that you can learn how to love them. So to kind of be present to that and to prioritize that this is about love. It's not about cajoling them into a certain lifestyle or I don't know, brainwashing them or something like that. It's about breaking down the barriers between your heart and their heart, and that you notice that there are some topics that are like walls between you and you haven't gained access to that heart, so regarding sex, that you prioritize love first, and that in a loving state, you'll much more likely be able to cherish that moment and see it as a sacrosanct, like just this really important event or series of events, right? I mean, that's just true of anything. When you meditate on gratitude, it's just like, I had this on the airplane the other day where I just was like overwhelmed with this surge of love. And I looked around, I was like, oh my God, these people are my brothers and sisters. I never have that feeling, right? We're supposed to think that way, right? One family under God, but that guy's not my brother because I hate him, right? But this is like, I just started seeing the stewards and stewardesses and the people on the flight, and I just loved them, and it was really weird. It came out of nowhere, but you'd want that. It's like just an appreciation for what is, And instead of seeing this as some burdensome task that you have to do as a parent, it's part of the job. Instead, it's relishing the fact that you have this opportunity to learn how to love your child on a deeper level than most likely your parents had, because it was really hard for parents in previous generations to have these conversations. But now we're in this golden era when it's all on the table and you get the opportunity. I know the coaching world always says this: I get to have this meeting with my kids instead of saying I have to. But for this particular instance, I kind of like that. It's like, yeah, this is an opportunity. It's a great opportunity. Cherish it. And if you come with that energy, it's very different than like, son, we need to talk. It's like, that's so frightening. Just like, how about a little bit of levity? How about a little bit of joy?
Yeah. Yeah, just like, hey, I think there's a topic that I'd love for us to talk about more,
Yeah.
and bring it up. Yeah, I know we don't talk about this at all yet, but why not talk about everything, a little bit more of everything.
Yeah. And just like in your boot camp, shout out to your boot camp. Everybody who's not in the boot camp,
Yeah.
go to the boot camp. It can also start with not just going straight in and just start talking about it. You can also just, in the boot camp, the first lesson is all about just learning how to ask good questions and learning how to listen, right?
Yeah.
Just sit down and like showing that you're interested in them as a person, their whole self, asking them about all range of things. And that becomes the culture between you and them, that nothing's off the table, that you can talk about anything. That's freedom. That's them experiencing freedom together with you. That's cool, right? So yeah, you don't even have to go straight with the hardest topic. You can work up to that, having progressively more rich conversations about more complex issues like sex. But you can start with, who's your best friend these days? And what do you like
Yeah.
about them? And when you show interest, they feel so much love. Like, wow, this person's really looking at me. They feel seen. Everybody wants to be seen. They want somebody to look at them and to feel like the most important person in the world to that person. And when you can offer them that, oh man, that's a very special feeling.
Sure is. That's what we can do as parents. Lucky us.
Yeah. Yeah, we have that 24/7, and yet many of us are distracted by our phones, right? Which is the exact opposite of making somebody feel seen. It makes them feel invisible. So yeah. Yeah, and also, in terms of like doing condition and stuff, it's also like finding the right opportunities, the most appropriate opportunities, looking for these opportunities where with your spiritual senses, instead of just trying to wedge the conversation in when you think it's the best time. You can find a little bit more of a natural rhythm to have these conversations when that kid is more likely to be open. Maybe they're a morning kid, not likely if they're a kid, but maybe they're really, excited around the weekends, or I don't know, maybe you guys have a tradition and, you'll find the rhythm. Yeah, this is the most natural thing. That's the thing. That's the last thing I want to say. Then we can wrap up. This is not something that's unnatural. It is the most natural thing, and humanity's coming out of, generations upon generations of just living incredibly unnaturally. And we're finding, Channel Guk, from my understanding, is just going back to a state where we actually go with the rhythm of nature, go with the rhythm of our design. And that's everything from how to think and how to feel, but also how to communicate and how to connect as a family. And it's a work in progress, but yeah, this is the golden era. Like I said, I really feel it. Like it's the only reason we can have these conversations on a platform like this is not because we're so fantastic. It's because Wi-Fi exists, and spiritual Wi-Fi exists to the extent that we can have conversations that humanity has never had, right? About the heavenly nature of sexuality. It's wild. It's wild. So yeah, it's fun over here. It's fun in the sunlight. Join us.
Join us. It's lots of fun. Yeah, I really believe God can be a part of every part of your life. And also, yeah, like you said, finding the good times for this kind of conversation. So ask God, honestly, like, yeah, I see this as an important thing, God. When can I talk to my kid about it? Or help me if I feel a bit awkward about it. Help me. Yeah, be honest with God and talk about that. So yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually a very fun conversation, I feel. It was not uncomfortable, but fun to talk about being uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, just practice. Practice with your friends, practice with your spouse, practice with the people in your life, and then just like that condition that you said about that lady. She just prioritized having that one particular difficult conversation about porn with
Hmm.
a bunch of different people. Yeah, by
Yep.
the end, it's just like you're just doing it. It's just
Yeah.
no problem. Just practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like gynecologists, they have to also practice lots of things. And then it's normal for them too. So it's definitely possible.
Absolutely. On that note, yeah, that's thank you. Thank you everybody. Please yeah, have fun. And if you need anything, reach out to Amelia, reach out to anybody at High Noon. We have the Wolfenbergers love talking about this stuff. Just reach out. Don't do this alone. Communities are very helpful for things like this to work your way through things that you find difficult. We can lighten the load a lot by working together.
That's right. Thanks, Andrew. See you guys all soon. Bye. Hey, if you liked this episode or even any of our content, please share to other parents. We're really, really grateful if you can share and spread the word.